𝗦𝗫𝗧𝗧𝗦𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧𝗧 Today in this video we will be doing a response to a particular individual who made a video in order to highlight the differences between the Shia Muslims and the sect who refers to itself as Ahl Sunnah. Now, some of the brothers requested me and some of the youth requested me to make a response to this video, and they made me aware of who the individual is and who the individual was who made this video. So I looked at some of his videos, and what I found is that the individual, he comes across as quite respectful and polite when he does discuss with other people, whether they be Shia, whether they be atheists, feminists, etc. So I thought that yes, we can make a reply to this video. And one of the purposes of doing so is because unfortunately in the world of those who refer to themselves as Sunnis, they unfortunately do take knowledge from people and anyone who can set up a YouTube makeshift studio in their bedroom or in their house. So this is one problematic issue that they have of taking knowledge from anyone. Anyhow, so the individual, as I mentioned, he spoke respectfully, but unfortunately what I did see is that he threatened one of our Shia scholars with a type of cage fight or something to this extent for his criticism towards Omar. And what this shows is that unfortunately many of these people who refer to themselves as Sunnis, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his pure progeny, when he is usually insulted or bad language is used against him by someone who is a non-Muslim, you will not see this kind of reaction. However, when someone who is a Shi'i criticizes one of their revered historical figures, they want to turn to violence. And this individual is probably due to some of the unsavory characters that he associates himself with and why he has such manners. But generally, he speaks with respect. So normally when we look at the Salafis, the Salafiyah who try to discuss the differences between the Shia and Sunni, they mention many different issues. And even in this video, we may not be able to do justice in around 30 minutes, but what we will do is try to do our best to address these issues. But these types of issues that are mentioned were various and they can take whole series. So let's watch the first clip, brothers and sisters, and see what argument is put forth or what differences are highlighted between us, the Shia Muslims, and those who refer to themselves as Ahl Sunnah.
The primary differences between Sunni and Shia, I would say, Wallahu A'lam, are three. Number one is the status of the Quran. Number two is the Sahaba. And number three, or the companions of the Prophet, and number three is Imamah. These are three things which I would say are the pillars of difference between Sunnis and Shia.
Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back. So you've just seen the clip and he mentions three crucial points of difference, which firstly is the Quran, secondly is the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and also Imamah, the leadership. So at a superficial level, if someone were to look at these aspects, they would say that mostly the Shia and those who refer to themselves as Sunnis have the same Quran. They all agree on the Quran, they all agree on the Prophet, they all believe in a type of leadership. But when one gets into the details, this is when the differences can arise. So what we'll do is that we'll look at the second clip and we'll see what he says about the Shia position of the Quran.
But being honest here, I have to be honest, that when you look into the classical Shia scholarship, it's very clear that there's a difference of opinion between the scholars in the Shia school of thought, especially the 𝗙𝗢𝗧𝗜𝗍 Shia school of thought, as it relates to the preservation of the Quran. So there are these who take the Islamic position that the Quran is preserved and sent down the Prophet, and the things that we've been reiterating, and this on our channel, so you can refer to it. And those Shia who basically don't take the Islamic position, and this is in their scholarship, and they don't basically believe that the Quran is preserved because they don't see that the Sahaba or the companions have done a good job in preserving the Quran. And of course, some of the classical scholars, I can quote them, are people like At-Tabrasi, who actually wrote a book called in translation, فصل الخطاب, basically the final say, في تحريف كتاب رب الأرباب, in the lack of, or the corruption of the book of the Lord of the Lords, which here means obviously Allah. So this is one example.
Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back. So the individual that we saw, he says that the Shia, there's some doubt as to whether the Shia believe in the preservation of the Quran, because they believe that the Sahaba, the companions, did not do a good job. So what I will do, inshallah ta'ala, is that I will highlight the real differences between our Quran and the Quran by those who refer to themselves as Ahlul Sunnah. Because, as we know, many of them try to stress on the preservation of the Quran and the Quran that they have, especially to the non-Muslims. But when one delves into the very details of their books and history, we see a whole different picture. Now, the Shia position of the Quran, and these points are also for both the Shia and any other non-Shia viewers watching. We want to discuss the points honestly. The majority opinion is that the Quran is preserved. It is no different from the Quran that we have now. The difference that occurs is in terms of how the interpretation is, because what we believe is that the majority of Muslims, unfortunately, they have distorted the original interpretation of the Holy Quran. And Quranic exegesis is ongoing. There's much ongoing research into this field by different scholars from both sects. So the Quran, according to the Shia, is preserved and it is not changed. Nothing has been added or subtracted. Now, the individual Mohammed Hijab, in his video, what he tries to do is he says that, okay, when we look at classical Shia scholars, but he actually failed to quote one classical Shia scholar. I don't think he knows maybe the definition of classical Shia scholars. So what we will do is we'll look at Sheikh Saduq in his book, The Shia Creed. And Sheikh Saduq, he has compiled many books of ahadith for the Shia, and he is someone of weight for the Shia. What Sheikh Saduq says is that our belief is that the Quran, which Allah has revealed to His Prophet Muhammad, is the same as the one between the two boards, daf'atain. And it is that which is in the hands of the people and is not greater in extent than that. So Sheikh Saduq, one of the big classical Shia scholars, clearly states in his book al-i'tiqadatul-imamiyya, the Shiite Creed, which is available in the English language, he states that the Quran has in fact been preserved. And if we go to another classical Shia scholar, Sheikh Tusi, what we find is in his book 𝗙𝗢𝗦𝗬𝗎, his tafsir, he says that raising questions about Tahreef of the Quran is inappropriate because as far as the question of anything being added to the Quran is concerned, there is a complete consensus that no such thing has happened, and about anything being subtracted from it, apparently the belief of all Muslims is that it has not happened either. So what he tries to indicate here is that most of the Muslims believed in the Quran being preserved. And he says the same is the authentic statement, especially in our sect, and it has been backed by Allama Sayyid Murtada, and the same is proven from our traditions, no doubt. So the quote continues there. But we have two Shia scholars, Sheikh Saduq and Sheikh Tusi, who affirm that Shia have the position of the preservation of the Quran, and there's others like Sheikh Mufid also who believe in the preservation of Quran, although some may try to raise some doubts and say that they do not believe in this. So dear brothers and sisters, pay attention that this individual giving information, Mohammed Hijab, he first states that classical Shia scholars, yet he himself failed to quote one classical Shia scholar. So this is why we have to be careful from who we take our knowledge and information from. And what he said was Tabrasi, it's Tabrasi. He tries to mention him as a classical scholar, but he in fact passed away and died in the year of 1902, so he would not be considered as a classical Shia scholar. And then he quotes some unknown person called Ali Kamal later on to say that, okay, this Shia Sheikh believes in the preservation of the Quran, when he in fact could have quoted bigger scholars such as Sayyid Muhammad Shirazi and Sayyid Al-Khawi, who actually wrote a whole work that's translated in English called the Prolegomena of the Quran and al-Bayan fi Tafsir al-Quran. And this book here proves and refutes the idea that Shia have any sort of Tahreef. And Sayed Al-Shobayri was a very big Shia scholar. So, as we know, the Salafiyya, they love to quote this work, 𝗧𝗨 al-Khitāb, by Tabrasi. They constantly quote it and they love to use this type of work. And regarding this work, there are different opinions of why the author Tabrasi wrote this. One opinion that is leveled is that his, or some people say this, is that his student, 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗢𝗍𝗔𝗧𝗑 Tehrani, said that he actually said that this work was misunderstood and that it should have been renamed something else in order for it to be understood correctly. So there's also some different opinions of why this book was wrote. But let's us assume that this was for the case of Tahreef, of trying to prove Tahreef. And also there are many scholars in the houses, the Islamic Shia seminaries, who have actually cursed this book. But we've got many points to mention, so inshallah I'll try to get through them quickly so that we're able to do this in a short amount of time. So let's say this book was made to prove Tahreef. Now this is one person who is not a Shia classical scholar. However, the sources that are quoted in here, many of them are weak and unknown from the Shia sources. And ironically, the author, he actually quotes a lot of Sunni, so-called Sunni sources in this book to prove Tahreef, that there has been some sort of distortion from the Quran. So whilst the Salafiyya like to quote this work to try to say that the Shia believe in Tahreef, at the same time he's using your own narrations. But now let me give some strong reasons, 9 strong points that any Shia can use as a proof that the Quran has been preserved and has not been distorted. So point 1 is where we have the Imams, peace be upon them, where they testify that the ayat of the Quran, in many ahadith, the Imams, they quote ayat of the Quran, they quote verses of the Quran, which are the same verses which are found in the Mus'haf, in the version of the Quran today. So you'll find many hadiths that may be about various topics, the Imams quote these, and there's no change in the verses. Second, point number 2, the narrations where the Imams swear by the entire Quran. So what the Imams would do, they would not swear on one particular verse of the Quran, they would swear on the entire Quran, indicating to us as Shi'as from our narrations that the Quran is one and the Quran has been preserved. And for example, we'll find that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam or Imam Baqir will swear on the Quran, and they came long after the Uthmanic compilation. Point 3, the narration of ثقلين, the 2 weighty things, where it says that the book of Allah in which there is right guidance and light, this is narrated in our books and in the books of the sect who refer to itself as the Ahl Sunnah. So this clearly shows again that the Quran is one and that it has not had any distortion in it. Otherwise the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ would not utter this statement that the book of Allah in which there is right guidance and light, and the Imams would not have narrated this. Number 4, narrations which discuss that it is a linguistic miracle. Of course, if you are saying that the Quran is corrupted and it has been distorted, you can no longer go on this point that it is a linguistic miracle. Number 5 is the mutawatir narrations, the narrations which have been narrated with many successive and multiple chains, which give us confidence about them. They tell us to compare our narrations to the Quran. So if the Quran is the benchmark, the very standard in which we judge the ahadith by, the Quran itself cannot be corrupted and the Quran must be one. Number 6, there are other narrations that we have where the Imams, peace be upon them, say that the Quran has been preserved, that the Quran, Holy Quran, has been preserved and that nothing has been added to it. For example, we find one narration of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam where he affirms that the name of the Imams were not mentioned in the person asked why has the names of the Imams not been mentioned in the Holy Quran, and then he goes on to speaking about the prayer and other Islamic aspects that we have in the religion, that why have the number of units of the prayer not been specified, why have they not been specified, in these types of details to show that the Sunnah should also be used to understand the Quran, and that these details do not need to necessarily be mentioned in the Quran and can be elaborated on in the Sunnah. So what it goes to show that when someone tries to say that you Shia believe your Imams have all been mentioned in Quran, all their names have been taken out, this is again a false statement based on an authentic narration that we have in Al-Kafi. 7. The narration in 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗢𝗕, a very famous book known by many of the Shia and the people who refer to themselves as Sunnis, where Imam Ali says that the Quran is guidance and light, and he does not restrict this to any particular time period, showing that the Quran is a light for all generations and all times. So if the Quran was distorted according to the Shia position, this would not be the case. Number 8, the recommendation to memorize and recite the Quran. Again, if the Quran was distorted, then why would we have this of the emphasis on memorizing and reciting the Quran and the thawab, the various rewards that one gets from Allah by reciting it? And finally, in addition to this, the 9th point that I'll mention, to try to get these out quickly, is that the Imams, as I said, confirm that the name's not mentioned in the Quran. And when you find traditions, many of them being weak, but when we find traditions which says that this particular ayah, this particular verse has been revealed about Ali or fi Ali, then we say this is extra elucidation on the verse and it is not actually a part of the verse, rather it is classed as ta'wil. So there are narrations like this that some get confused about and try to say that these narrations allude to Tahreef, but this is not the case. Anyway, since Mohammed Hijab liked to mention this fasl al-khitab, which is constantly parroted and repeated by the Salafis, we will show another book which much of their sect loves to hide, and they tried their best to hide this from the masses. But before I show this book, it's worth mentioning that one of my friends and teachers, he was in the central Swedish mosque bookshop, Salafi bookshop, and he bears witness, he swears to Allah, and he called me when he found this book in their bookshop. So the book here I'll present it for the audience. This book, Al-Furqan, was written 40 years after Fasl al-Khitab and was an aim to prove Tahreef from the narrations of the sect who refers to itself as Ahl Sunnah. And ironically enough, this was bought in a bookshop it was not a Shi'i bookshop, a bookshop belonging to Shia Muslims. It was in fact a bookshop belonging to Salafis. Now, brothers, just to show you something, we'll put the screenshot on the screen. This book, Al-Furqan, is still available online to buy, whereas Fasl al-Khitab, this book that was written by the Shia scholar, is not found in a lot of the Shia bookshops, and they stopped printing this because of the content and disagreement of the vast majority of Shia scholars against Tahreef. But here we have Al-Furqan. Now the Egyptian scholar and al-Azhar graduate, the same country as Mohammed Hijab, Abdul Latif, known as Ibn al-Khatib, I believe, he authored this book, and it received much widespread condemnation, and the Egyptian government tried their best to hide this book. And many of the so-called Ahl Sunnah, they tried to hide this book because it exposed many of their narrations in history with regards to the preservation and distortion of the Quran. Yasir Qadhi, dear brothers and sisters, is a leading expert on Quranic sciences, and his work on ulum al-Quran, the Quranic sciences, is actually the leading and most popular work in the English language for the sect who refers to itself as Ahl Sunnah. Now, it was a very big disaster for them because Yasir Qadhi, obviously, he's in taqiyya, he's concealing his belief in Tahreef, and this was actually exposed if we show the following clip in some private emails. And what's problematic about this is that many of these young Salafis can scream about it as much as they want, but this person who is a scholar himself, who has delved into the tradition about the Quran, whose works are used in Quranic sciences, cannot believe in the preservation of the Quran anymore according to the sources of the so-called Ahl Sunnah. And I don't blame him for this, as we'll present some of these later on. But inshallah ta'ala, we'll just present a clip quickly so you get an idea of some of the content that were in his emails with regards to the Quran being distorted.
Yasir Qadhi clearly mentions, and I quote, he said, "Fact. As per previous paragraphs in the second interpretation, the recitation of the Quran clearly has some human elements in it. from the faux pas to the lahajat. Problem. How then can we understand the Quran as being kalam Allah, kalam meaning speech, the speech of Allah, when clearly there are some human aspects to it? Brothers and sisters, I want to repeat that sentence for you in case you didn't digest it. He said, problem. How then can we understand the Quran as being kalam Allah, the speech of Allah, when clearly there are some human aspects to it? Now, brothers and sisters, it carries on getting worse. He mentions that we should now basically rethink, reinterpret this entire notion ourselves. He mentions we discard all these theological schools and understand that none of them are in fact divine, and hence we cannot assume that they will answer each and every problem. Hence, we start from scratch and rethink through the entire notion of kalam. To facilitate this, we might imagine ourselves in the era of the tabi'un, so that we are not impeded by fully flushed out theological boxes and allow our thought processes to, pun intended, think outside of the box. We are not longer concerned with people labeling us Ash'ari or Mu'tazili, because we have now jettisoned these man-made structures, and no doubt rather ambitiously we are attempting to redraw the blueprints of the new structure. Brothers and sisters.
Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back. So Mohammed Hijab, again, he argues with us that we believe the Sahaba didn't do a good job. But when you delve into their sources, you find that one would actually believe the Sahaba didn't do a good job from their sources, because the Sahaba themselves had so much disagreement about the Quran. They had many different ways that they would recite verses which are not found in their readings today. So if anyone, like as we saw Yasir Qadi, if anyone really analyzes this in a sincere way, he'll realize that according to their narrative, I'm not saying according to our narrative, that the Sahaba, they distorted the Quran and they added to the Quran. But what we'll do first is that we'll present a Salafi publication, an author by the name of 𝗧𝗨𝗥𝗡𝗦 or Zahir, some people say, who was heavily against the Shia and produced works against the Shia. And we'll show how they shoot themselves in the foot when they try to prove that the Shia believe in Tahreef. So inshallah, let us just show the screenshot quickly, as you can see on the screen. Now on page 169, this book is Al-Shia wal-Quran. Now this accursed individual who said that Shias are agents, they're Israeli agents, and he called us kuffar, what does he say? He tries showing a narration from the book An-Nasikh, and this book is problematic as it's attributed to different authors. It's attributed to different authors, so we do not know who the actual author of this book is, and it's not a reliable book at all. But he states that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, someone asked him about the Mus'haf and how to read one of the verses in Surah Al-Fatiha. So what apparently Imam Sadiq alayhi salam stated is that Sirat man an'amta alayhim غير المغضوب عليهم وغير الضالين. Now this recitation is different from what we find today. This author Ihsan, who is promoted, some of his books are promoted by the Salafis, he wanted to show that Shias are kuffar for believing in distortion of the Quran, and he presented this so-called narration which is unknown and not relied on by Shia at all, because the book is very problematic itself. Now, unfortunately, this is what happens when you try to blame the Shia, but you yourself have this in your own books. The Salafi, he admits that this is Tahreef, and Al-Furqan, as we mentioned, this book by the Sunni author, the one who refers to himself as Sunni, he in fact states this very same thing. So let's go into it and see how Omar recited the Quran. What we find is that here, Omar, many of us know, everyone knows how to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. You'll find a 5-year-old kid or younger than that, they've memorized Surah Al-Fatiha. They know how to recite it. And Mohammed Hijab wants to tell us that if we even criticize some Sahaba or believe some of them were bad, we can't trust the Quran anymore. But according to his narrative, what did Omar recite the Quran as? صراط من أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم وغير الضالين. So this way of Omar, who recited the Quran, is nowhere to be found in their readings today, nor is it to be found in the Quran. So this was Omar's original statement, and someone fabricated this on Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. But the point here is that this Salafi author, as we see in his book, tried to say that we believe in Tahreef by this and said this is kufr, and he's actually labelled his second so-called caliph as a disbeliever by his standards from what he said in the book. And dear brothers and sisters, some of them try to give the explanation that this is also found on page 106 of Al-Furqan. Some of them try to give the explanation that this recitation of Omar was a type of tafsir. But what we ask them today is that are any of you allowed to read in this way as Omar read? And aren't the Sahaba the people who you have to follow, and that they're the people for guidance in terms of the Prophet's Sunnah? Yet Omar recited this way. So what we ask you is that can we recite this way? And is this kufr or is it not? Because as Ihsan, this author Ihsan Ilahi, tried to prove that this is a form of kufr as he attributed to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So we say that are you allowed to recite this way? And we also have, there are also sources that they do have that Omar recited this way in his prayers, and that this was not merely just some type of tafsir or alternative reading. The second Sahabi that they're meant to follow recited this way, صراط من أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم وغير الضالين. So do any of you really follow Omar as you say, and that he's a pure preserver of the one who preserved the Sunnah, yet you don't recite this way? Are you allowed to recite this way? These are some questions that we do want to ask them, inshallah ta'ala. Now, as we have mentioned, just to recap, some of the Sahaba such as Omar, and it was proven in this book that he recited Quran in a different way to the Quran that we have now. So it does show us in a way, and according to their narrative, that the Sahaba did a bad job as they recited a completely different Quran. Now, the Uthmanic Quran, we as Shia, we believe, yes, it has been preserved because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure that his Quran was preserved through the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and Imam Ali alayhi salam and the Ahlul Bayt. So we're not disputing on the Quran that we have today, nor are we saying that any change came through of this Quran. Now, dear brothers and sisters, the Quran, the distortion of the Quran goes back to something in the books of the sect who refers to itself as the Sunnah, as it goes back to the 7 ahruf. Now, harf can mean something such as a letter. Harf can be a single letter, it can be a whole word, or it can be speech. But they have something called the 7 ahruf, which they believe the Quran was revealed in. They believe the Quran was revealed in these 7 ahruf. Now, the difference between us and them, before we go to our next episode, and because there's many points to mention, and inshallah ta'ala I haven't spoken too fast because I'm trying to get them done as soon as possible. The Imams alayhim salam, for us the Shia, this is one main difference, is that we believe the Quran was revealed in 1 harf, whereas the sect who refers to itself as Ahl Sunnah believe that the Quran was revealed in 7 ahruf. And due to poor scholarship that they have, many of them could not define what 7 ahruf are, and many of them have ikhtilaf, they have differences and disputes and contradictions as to what these 7 ahruf even were, and even to this day they still dispute on this. So inshallah ta'ala, on the next episode we'll go into this, but I'll finish by reading a narration from Imam Baqir alayhi salam regarding our Quran that we have in the possession today in our hands. So Imam Baqir alayhi salam has said in Al-Kafi, and Sayed Al-Shobayri quotes these narrations in his prolegomena of the Quran to show the Shia position of the Quran being preserved. Imam Baqir, the 5th Shia Imam, says, the Quran is one, revealed from the one, the difference, meaning Allah, the differences have been caused by the narrators. So it is the people who have caused the differences, whereas the Quran is revealed in 1 harf. And for the sect who refers to itself as Al-Sunnah, they have a very big problem with the 7 ahraf because many of them cannot define what it is. So inshallah ta'ala, brothers and sisters, on the next episode, this was really an introduction, we will go into the 7 ahraf, and then after that what we want to highlight is our difference between the Sahaba of our opinion and their opinion, and also about leadership and imamah. So as a brief recap and to sum up the episode, we clearly saw how he tried to quote a Mohammed Hijab, firstly tried to quote a so-called classical Shia scholar who was not a classical Shia scholar. We have shown that the classical Shia scholars do not believe in Tahreef. He tried to quote one work to say that one Shia scholar tried to prove Tahreef, which many Salafis do. We showed Al-Furqan, and I've only quoted like one page of this, just one page. But if you look, there's an abundance of narrations which prove Tahreef, and this was a Sunni, so-called Sunni author, who made this book in order to prove Tahreef, and many of them have actually hidden it, and this book was purchased in a Salafi bookshop in Sweden by one of my teachers and friend who got this and showed me this book. So we've shown that if you just want to use one book against a Shia to try show people, oh look, they have a scholar who believes in Tahreef, we will do the same thing. And we showed that Omar, he in fact recited the very basic surah that all of us recite every day, that children recite. Omar recited this in a different way and said, 𝗦𝗨𝗣𝗣𝗕𝗦𝗓. Therefore, Mohammed Hijab, you try to say that we believe the Sahaba did a bad job. Well, according to your own texts, the Sahaba actually did not do a good job because the Quran that you have now is different. So join us for the next episode, dear brothers and sisters, where we'll be showing some more books. We'll be showing some of their books with authentic narrations to show whether they really do have all of the Quran according to their narrative, or whether some of their Quran is missing, and whether they can level the accusation of Tahreef against us. And then we will move on to other issues. So thank you for joining us, dear brothers and sisters. And we don't want to offend anyone by this, nor do we want to offend anyone from the sect who refers to itself as Ahl Sunnah. Rather, we just want to highlight these differences from the text and give information which is accurate, not the wrong information, which unfortunately Mohammed Hijab was doing in his video. May the peace and blessings be upon the Prophet Muhammad and his purified progeny, and may the wrath of Allah be upon the oppressors and tyrants who oppress them. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم والعن أعداءهم.